Clay Hunt was an amazing young man, and in many ways it is fitting that we are here today to sign a bill into law with his name on it. I first met Clay in the Marine Corps. I saw embodied in him the ideal that men and women don't fight for politics, they fight for one another. At one point in Afghanistan, on our second tour, Clay was voicing his frustration with our mission. I asked him then, "Why are you here?" And he said, "I'm here for you, Jake."
A veteran recounting his friend, Clay Hunt, a Marine combat vet who suffered from PTSD after serving in Iraq and Afghanistan and who took his life at the age of 28, took his own life. President Obama signing a bill yesterday, the Veteran Suicide Prevention Act. Joining me now from Newsmax Washington, former Defense Department spokesman J.D. Gordon, to go in depth. J.D., at times I would be conflicted in Congress because there would be bills that are well-meaning in their intent, but from theory to practice it would be difficult. Can this legislation actually help prevent suicide among our veterans returning home from combat in the Middle East?
JD, thanks for having me on the show. I think this is a good bill. I think it's going to help veterans because it's going to increase awareness of where to get help. It stipulates a couple things. One is that the VA will have different websites and information about veterans where they can go for help immediately. So it's going to make it easier for them to get information right off the bat. That's number one. Number two, it's going to increase the number of psychiatrists because it's going to help with student loans. So it will incentivize people to become psychiatrists at the VA. So that'll help too. And also there is an annual report which I think we need to have because the VAs have just not been getting the job done, and it's been a national tragedy. You know, we have 22 veterans commit suicide a day in America. There's about 22 million veterans in the U.S., a little less than that, and there's 22 suicides a day from them. So something's got to be done. I think the bill is a step in the right direction. A
step in the right direction, but as you outline the aid for physicians to become psychiatrists, that's something in the future. I mean, because the money is there, they have to go into that specialty, so there is a time delay in terms of the immediacy of help. But I don't want to be overly critical. Perhaps it was ever thus with legislation from its inception to the exact realization of the goals of the bill signed into law. You mentioned those horrendous statistics. According to DOD, 22 veterans commit suicide each and every day. That is a statistic that is so troubling. You wonder, in one sense, did it take a congressional bill to motivate action on this? Or has this been part of the problem we've seen in the VA healthcare system?
Well, JD, that's an excellent point. You know, one of the big problems with the VA is we found out what happened in Phoenix, right in your home state in Arizona. We had these secret waiting lists apparently out there where 40 veterans died waiting to get health care. So that's why we have the bill today, because of the outrage nationally for that. You know, for the VA, I'm not very critical of the bill. I think the bill is a step in the right direction, but I am very critical of the VA. And the reason we have so many problems with the VA is it's because it's government gone wild. Could you imagine going to the DMV for health care? That's what the VA is, though, because these are government workers. They know it's near impossible to fire them because these public sector unions protect them so much. So there's really no incentive. It doesn't matter if they treat 2 patients a day or 20. They're going to get paid the same. There's very little incentive. So, you know what, JD, we have to get tough on these public sector unions. The Congress can help by passing legislation there, but it's really tough because the Democrats get so much money from these labor unions that's why we can't fix the VA. So the bill is a step in the right direction, but trust me, it's not going to solve too much. It's going to help, but it's not going to be enough to fix the VA.
And I have my suspicions on that conference bill between the House and the Senate, the well-intentioned act to have VA reformed health care. Bernie Sanders toeing the line for those public employee unions as chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. Now, JD, Paul Rieckhoff, the founder of the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of Americans, had this to say about passage of the Suicide Prevention Act. Let's take a listen.
This is people power. If the people lead, the politicians will follow. All the politicians were up there on stage, but the real leaders were in the audience. We're sick of Washington being broken, so this is a win. It's a big win, but it's a first step. We've got a long way to go.
Is Paul's criticism of the Congress justified, JD?
Well, you know, I think that, like President Reagan said, when they feel the heat, they will see the light. And I think Paul gets to that. So I think that the Congress really has to pay, well, more attention, and I think we have to try to break these labor unions. With Bernie Sanders, you mentioned a great point. Look, he chairs that committee. He's been chairing that committee in the past, right? But he's taken all this money from labor unions. So people need to put heat on him to say, look, stop looking after these special interests of these labor unions that won't fire anybody and make it easier to get rid of some of these people. There are a lot of Republicans that have been pushing for that, but we just need, like Paul says, we need the people of America to be pushing more for it. Otherwise, Congress will never get the message. We ought to have a lobbying campaign in Vermont against Bernie Sanders, why he's blocking real fixes to the VA.
And you mentioned the term lobbying. I think it's important to remember that it's not always lobbying in the Washington special interest sense. As Paul was pointing out, when veterans mobilized to bring this to the attention of elected leadership, government worked the way it's supposed to. People in office respond to the concerns of their constituents. A couple other questions, JD. We got about a minute and a half left. Very quickly, do you think the motion picture American Sniper has drawn more attention, or this trial now going on in Texas of the alleged murderer of Chris Kyle, has that focused more attention on PTSD in vets?
Absolutely, JD. I think The American Sniper was a great film. I hope it wins the Academy Award. It was one of the best pictures I've ever seen, and it certainly draws a lot of attention to PTSD. And that man who shot Chris Kyle, he was the guy suffering from PTSD. The trial's also going to bring a lot of attention to this. It's an issue, JD, we really have to work a lot more on. It's a shame that we have so much problems with the VA, so many problems with PTSD. We've really got to solve it, and veterans could get on board today by helping to push for change for those leaders that are blocking the change. Bernie Sanders comes to mind.
We will note for the record that the notion of PTSD in the case of the alleged killer of Chris Kyle is very much in question during that trial. Be that as it may, final note, 30 seconds, JD, on the confirmation of Ash Carter. It came through the Senate yesterday. Now he is Secretary of Defense. What kind of Secretary of Defense will Ashton Carter be? And again, about 30 seconds.
Well, I think he's going to be a good Secretary of Defense as far as the Obama administration goes. I don't think he's going to stand up for all the things they're trying to have him do. He's been telegraphing that he'll resist some of the moves to empty out Guantanamo. I think he's going to be good at acquisition reform. I don't think he'd be as good as someone who a Republican would appoint. But for Obama, he's probably the best we're going to get.
And on that note, we will end this JD to JD conversation. Thanks so much to JD Gordon.